Welcome to Applied Speaking, a podcast where I interview speaking experts and let them live coach me. This week's guest is the phenomenal improvisation and speaking coach, Rebecca Stockley. Rebecca has been teaching and performing improvisation since the 80s and now teaches people how to use this skill to improve their communication. We play some improvisation games and Rebecca explains how you can train your brain to always be able to come up with something to say. One of the parts I found most interesting is where she explains how adrenaline influences your ability to improvise and how you can mitigate this. I think you'll enjoy the interview and you might want to play some of the games yourself. Hey Rebecca, I'm so excited to have you on the podcast today.
It's so nice to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me, Pim.
My pleasure. Could you tell me something about how you got involved with improvisation?
Yes, I am an improviser, and it was a long time ago. I had studied to be an actor in university, and I was acting and directing and performing, and in San Francisco and then in Seattle, and a series of coincidences led me to this improvisation workshop in Seattle. It was this little tiny building in the rain. It was a rainy
Mm-hmm.
night, and I went to this workshop, and the guy who was teaching the workshop, old friend now, his name is Josh Conescu. One of
Mm-hmm.
the things he did is he asked if anybody would like to read. He had copies of this book, the book that was the improvisation book that they were learning from and teaching from, and he asked if anybody wanted to borrow it, and I borrowed it, and the book was out of print at the time, so
Mm-hmm.
it was a copy of the book, like put it on a copier, and yeah, it was a copy, and I borrowed it and read most of it and just went, oh, this is something. And
Mm-hmm.
I honestly, I feel as though when I started reading the book, I was an actor, and when I finished reading it, I was an improviser. And this is an actual copy of the book, uh, Impro by Keith Johnstone.
Okay.
And Keith Johnstone is English, so he drew me a picture. So
Cool.
he's from
Nice.
England, and in the late '70s, he moved to Calgary, Canada, to teach at a university, and it was there that he created this improvisation format called theater sports,
Yeah.
and it's played all over the world. Theater sports today is everywhere. And so I was in Seattle when I started learning and playing theater sports,
Mm-hmm.
and almost immediately I started teaching improvisation. And shortly thereafter, one of my students in my improv workshop came to me and said, I need you to do this topic we did today. I need you to do this with my coworkers. And I'm like, ugh. He was a grown up and he wore a suit when he got to the class and had to change his clothes in the dressing room into more casual clothing. He was like, yeah, I had the artist idea that artists are artists and creatives, and people who work in any kind of business are not. And
Are
so,
boring.
so I'm like, how could I offer anything to the people you work with?
Mhm.
And it was he who understood the value of the principles of improvisation. This was the mid '80s, and he sort of led me into doing the work that I've been doing ever since. So I'm still a performer, I'm still an improviser, and in addition to that, I do what is called applied improv, where I use the principles of improv to help people communicate effectively off stage.
Ah, okay. So how does that work? Do you like help them gain confidence or?
Yeah, I think so. When people learn to be spontaneous
Hmm.
and just respond. For some people, it's responding quickly. It can help to remove filters so that we're not watching ourselves when we speak. And I'm not talking about disrespecting the people that you're talking with. Some of our filters are just to help society work. But I'm talking about how we sometimes stall out, we try to say the right thing and we hesitate and we're not sure,
Mm.
and that can stop us from really showing up as our whole selves. And improvisation has a lot of exercises and games that help us let go of some of those restraints that adults have.
Yeah.
Children just improvise, children just play all the time. And through education, we learn to control and restrain and sit in rows and behave ourselves and raise our hands. And I'm not talking about, improv being a way to learn to be rude, but it is a way to get more in touch with yourself so that when you respond, it's quick and it's unfettered.
Yeah, okay, for sure. Yeah, especially those about the filters I recognize about myself that when I started to learn more about public speaking, I started to notice how much I actually could say that I'm holding back from.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. And
that's interesting too. How do you help people to overcome that?
well, uh, it's different for different people. For some, it's just going as quickly as possible seems to help.
Hmm.
For others, occupying one part of the brain so that the creative part of your brain is able to communicate more freely. An example of that, this is a very odd example, but when
Hmm.
I mentioned Keith Johnstone, when he is interviewed, one of the things he does is he does a Sudoku while, the puzzle. He
Yeah, yeah,
does a
yeah.
Japanese puzzle while he is being interviewed in order to not edit himself as he speaks.
Okay,
So,
so he's just making the
yeah,
Sudoku and then answering the question. Okay.
yeah. So, so for some people, there's like if you occupy the intellect, then we can be more more. I don't know. A popular term in the States today is authentic, but I don't know if that's the right word for it. It's just
Hmm.
more spontaneous.
Yeah.
And then a big part of it, from my perspective, is letting go of your own ego, letting go of your own need to be clever or interesting or smart or to appear well read. Let go of all that,
Yeah.
especially let go of trying to be funny, and instead say the most obvious thing. And would you play a game with me briefly?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, cool. So I'm going to just say a word. This is basically free association.
Okay.
And I'll just say one word. We'll use English because that's my restraint. But I'll say a word
Hmm.
and just respond with the word it makes you think of.
Yeah. All
And then
right.
I'll respond to yours and we'll see where it takes us. And keep
Okay.
it one word.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay. Tree.
Four.
FOR, like four.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I
No, you don't
assumed
need to
you said
explain.
three. But yeah,
I
yeah, yeah.
said, yeah, tree. Oh, you thought I said three, the
Yeah, yeah,
number.
yeah. But I understand you said three. But that's
That's
what it
okay. Let's
reminded me
go with
of.
it anyway. Anyway.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
you said four.
Yeah.
I'll say square.
But
Bottom.
top,
Lake.
water,
Duck.
family,
Babies.
cute,
Cuddly.
yellow,
Sunshine.
warm,
Blankets.
soft.
Wow. Okay, we'll stop there.
Alright.
So in a way,
Nice.
we go on a little journey.
Yeah. It
and
was
and
really
that's
setting up a nice environment.
it was.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was very pastoral. And it won't always be.
Hmm.
So just learning to go with what comes up is a big part of learning to improvise. And to illustrate why that's important, I want to play the um, the opposite of this game. It's terrible. It's a
Okay.
terrible, terrible game. I don't think it has a name except being called a terrible game.
All
So,
right.
so this is where you intentionally say a word completely unrelated to the word that I say.
Okay.
So if I say tree, meaning the kind that grows outside. So if I
Yeah,
say
yeah,
tree, say a word that's unrelated to tree, no
yeah.
relationship at all,
All right.
disassociation. So that we're playing a game of disassociation. So tree,
Car.
do you think there might be an association between a tree and a car? Maybe.
Well, maybe because it's like nature. I was thinking about nature and then the opposite of nature, but
Okay,
well,
good.
yeah.
No, I'll go with it anyway. So you
Yeah,
said
yeah.
car. I'll try to come up with something unrelated to car. Oh boy. Stars.
Blankets.
Okay, so stars is related to car because everything on our planet is made of star stuff. So it's like everything's related, right? And
Yeah, all
star
right.
and blankets,
Uh-huh.
for some people that's completely related because in their bedroom they have those stars on the ceiling, right?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah,
Or
yeah, yeah.
or you might have blankets with stars printed on them.
Yeah.
So being disassociated is almost impossible, and yet we hamper ourselves by trying to be, a lot of us, trying to be clever and come up with something nobody else would think of.
Mm.
When improvisation functions the most effectively, when you go with what is the most obvious to you. So let's continue with disassociation just a little longer, and I won't stop and evaluate, but
Uh,
just see what happens. You would you like to start?
yeah, for sure. Waves.
uh, Animation.
Bicycles?
Rutabaga.
What?
Sorry, it's a kind of a vegetable. It's like a turnip.
Oh, okay.
Sorry. I don't know what. Yeah, that's the English word for it. But it's like a
Yeah, yeah.
turnip.
All right, all right. Uh, airplane.
Prank.
Homework.
Schism. Okay, we'll stop.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
do you get how challenging that is?
Yeah, it is kind of because every time I come up with a word that might be useful to use, then I'm like, well, no, it's kind of connected, so I can't use that. Even the words I said were actually in my mind like, okay, bicycle, but yeah, it's kind of linked to animation because you can animate bicycles, so it's not really the best choice. So yeah,
Yeah, I know. And immediately I thought of an animation of a bicycle that I've
yeah,
seen. So, it's like, and waves. Everything's waves. Everything's
yeah,
waves. So,
yeah. That was
right?
a hard one.
So, the point, I mean, the point of this is not that everything is connected, although it does feel that way when you're playing a game. The point is that what we want from improvisers, what we want
Hmm.
from, from really free and spontaneous communication is for people to not be second guessing themselves and editing, but rather go with what's the most obvious to you. And then the point that felt revolutionary to me when I started studying improvisation is that what is obvious to me is unique from anyone else because what I have read, what I've experienced in my life, my upbringing, my background, my inheritance, my DNA, I'm
Hmm.
unique. And so my association is likely to be different from yours. And that idea felt really new to me when I started studying improv. Uh, it's not new to people who are younger because the idea that we're all unique became a very popular idea in
Hmm.
education
Hmm.
in the United States anyway. So it's very common that if I have a group of people and I say every idea that you have is completely unique to you, the it's common that the older folks will go, "Oh." And younger people will be like, "Yeah, what are we doing now? What comes next?" So it's really interesting. But
Uh,
being obvious. So if you and I were to make a story one word at a time.
Mm-hmm.
Rather than trying to be interesting, just be obvious. Got it?
Yeah. Okay, so
So
you're making your own true story for yourself, and the other one is going to make his or her own meaning out of it.
yes, yeah, and yeah, that's a great way to put it. So if I say once, or let me throw that away. I'll start with a name. Like if I say Maria,
Yeah.
then the next word might be
Um, Dressing.
okay. So we want it to make it a story.
Okay.
Like a narrative.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So no association, but just a
Yes,
continuous
yeah.
story.
So
Okay.
we're gonna
Yeah.
shift. My
Okay,
bad. I
Maria.
didn't explain it right.
Yeah.
Woo!
Okay. So a story, one word at a time.
Yes, a story, one word at a time.
Yeah. All right.
Would you like to start? Give me the name of a character. We'll start that way.
Okay. Will
Jumped.
in front.
Of, it's okay. Sometimes, I mean, your English is not your first language, so if you say
Yeah.
to, I forgive you. It was Will jumped in front of
Mhm.
your word.
Um, die
Bus
but
stopped,
and
looked
at
the
passengers
declaring
to
them
that
they
are
his
very
close
but
new.
friends.
Okay, we'll stop there. That was
Yeah,
all
yeah,
one
yeah.
sentence,
Yeah.
and it was a little bit surreal,
hmm
right? He jumped in front of the bus and looked into the eyes of the passengers and declared, "You are my close but new friends." It's a little bit,
Yeah.
it's a little bit surreal, and
Yeah.
still, you and I, from across an ocean
hmm
and a continent, we
Yeah.
just created this story spontaneously.
Yeah,
And
absolutely. It was kind of a funny story.
yeah, and one of the things I encourage people to do is just be obvious so that you can keep it simple. Keep it simple, and if you can tell a simple story, then you can add complexity. One of the things that people see when they look at improv is they think it looks creative, crazy, creative,
hmm
like inventive, clever, unexpected, random. So that's what they think they're going to be doing when they go to improv class.
Yeah.
And that may be in some improv classes. The way that I teach is and the way that I perform is to go with what comes up. Just go with what comes up for you and be obvious,
hmm
and then it will be unexpected because there are more than one people making a story, or there are more than one people, right? More than one person
Yeah, for
making the
sure.
scene, or the we improvise plays at the company where I work. It's
hmm
in San Francisco. It's Bats Improv, BATS, like bats.
Yeah.
So Bats Improv, uh, and we create spontaneous plays. Like you start and you keep going until it ends,
hmm
and it's like, and you've got an hour. Or when we were in the theater before the pandemic, we
hmm
would do a full length 2 hour improvised play that would have an intermission in the middle. And during the intermission, we would never talk about what will come next. We would only talk about things that we knew had happened,
Yeah.
so that we're all spontaneously creating together. So it ends up being it looking very fast and very spontaneous and random and unexpected, because it's many minds working together to co-create a moment, and it's one moment at a time, and then it turns into a story.
Yeah, okay. So I understand it, I think, because if everyone's just making his very own story and that's the story you're in the best position to actually perform over there because you just live by it and it's just coming out of your head, then other persons are seeing a different story than what's playing in their head. So it seems like improvising to them. Well, it is actually improvising, but you're actually just telling your own story.
Well, I'm not telling my own personal story.
Mm-hmm.
But I am telling the story that comes up for me.
Yeah. Okay, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So every story is not about me.
Yeah, exactly.
But it
Yeah,
is
exactly. Not about you, but it is coming out of your head. Yeah,
coming out of me. Yeah.
yeah.
I think I actually believe that we all have limitless imaginations, but our expectations of our imaginations and what we imagine are guided by what we experience and what we
Mm-hmm.
read and what we, the films that we have seen, the things that we have witnessed. In a way, if you watch small children play, they will act out the things that they have witnessed. They'll like, yeah, here's a negative example, but it's vivid. A
Yeah.
little kid witnesses a car accident
Mm-hmm.
and sees someone being taken on a stretcher by paramedics, sees somebody being taken to the hospital.
Yeah.
It's likely that child will act out cars crashing and their little bear being taken to the hospital, in order to work out, to play with the idea of the experience that they had. And adults stop doing that. And continuing to play it keeps us healthy. It keeps us present and alive and connected.
Yeah, in the previous call we had, you told me something I didn't realize or didn't look at it in that way before. You said play is the opposite of depression.
Yeah,
Can you
play is the
explain something about
opposite.
that?
Yeah. So adults think that the opposite of play is work. I'm either
Mm-hmm.
working or playing. I'm working right now.
Yeah.
No, I'm playing. And for many adults, play involves alcohol. It's like it's not play unless they have a beer or wine or something. So it's work and play. And uh, scientists have revealed that the opposite of play isn't work. The opposite of play is depression. If we get to the point where we're not playing anymore, actually, children as well, and many mammals, if we're in a situation where we can't play, we become depressed. Play gives us resilience and it replenishes the reserves that we have. If you think about a battery it's like a battery that you use it up and throw it away.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of how we think of our own resources, my personal resources. I use up the battery and I throw it away. And I go to sleep, I feel a little better, but every day it's like I have a little less.
Mm-hmm.
Play replenishes, so it turns you into a rechargeable battery, a battery that
Mm-hmm.
you can plug in and recharge. Play does that for us. And part of the reason is because in play, we're taking risks. We're trying things we don't know we haven't done before. We're responding spontaneously. We're working, we're playing together. We're being changed by other people. We're paying attention to other people. We're letting the world affect us. And when we lose in play, right? When you lose and when you're playing a game, you go, "Ooh, next time I'll get that one right.
Mm-hmm.
I won't make that mistake again." But yeah, I think one of the things we talked about when we met uh, was if you lose when you're giving a presentation to your company, if you misspeak, become nervous, forget the words you were going to say, that kind of failure makes us feel terrible. It's not just making a mistake. It feels like it's compromising our survivability in the workplace.
Mm-hmm.
And people can really, be stopped by the smallest of failures in the workplace. So one of the things that we teach improvisers is to let go. When you make a mistake, let go. So I want to ask you to try this. Put your arms way up in the air
Mm-hmm.
and say, I failed.
I failed!
Okay, good. Now bend over and put your hand in front of your face and look down at the floor and say, I failed.
I failed.
Okay, so when we make a mistake and we do
Mm-hmm.
this, we're telling our system, yeah, that was bad. Make yourself small, hide from
Mm-hmm.
the world, disengage. If we do this, we can learn from our mistake and get on with it. I don't recommend doing this if you have a problem with a family member or the government. Woohoo! I made a mistake. Don't do it then. But when you're being creative, when you're exploring, when you're playing, learning to let go of your mistakes rather than going, oh, is really healthy.
Yeah, okay.
So it's like
Cool.
you're
So,
physically letting go.
yeah, cool. So, it doesn't sound like stress relief only, but also like a way of engaging in your work itself. So, it isn't like play and work, but also the play is very much integrated in work so that you can take things less seriously than they actually are. Like it's all a game and we're just playing together.
Yeah, I think it does bring perspective.
Yeah.
You know, many people who practice improvisation find that it unblocks their creativity. I knew an artist who had stopped making art and she took improv and started making art again. A writer with writer's block might take improv and their writer's block goes away. So we can become, as adults, we can become very calcified or rigid in our behaviors and our expectations of ourselves.
Hmm.
And improv can kind of soften some of those expectations and shift us. People who take improv, I'm going to quote one of my friends, Carol Hazenfield. She said, people who take improv become dissatisfied with a pale existence.
Okay. Cool. it's it feels so promising to learn more about this, to learn how to be more comfortable with yourself in all kinds of situations, and just know you can rely on yourself and whatever comes up in your mind, and there will always be something.
Yeah, there will be something. I mean, even if you've got nothing, there's something.
Hmm.
So here. Can I give you an example of that one?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so there's a game, a very silly game that's called Sound Ball.
Hmm.
Actually, it's called Sound Ball where I am. Improv games have many different names because they
Hmm.
travel the world very quickly, and everybody gives them a different name. So the way I play Sound Ball, we would be standing in a circle, but you and I are here. So I'm going to throw a ball about the size of a soccer ball.
Yeah.
I'm breaking the rules. I'm touching it with my hands. But I'm going to throw it to you and make a
Uh-huh.
sound. And when I throw it, I throw it toward the camera and I
Yeah.
make a sound. And then
Okay.
you repeat that sound and throw me a different sound.
Yeah.
So this is not words, this is just noise.
Hmm.
Okay? Here we go. Woof!
Woof. Oh.
Oh, ah.
Ah. Huh.
Huh. Boop, 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 boop.
Poop, 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 poop. Puh.
Pa. Er.
Ah.
Bah. Ah.
Oh. Mm.
Mm. Very nice. Okay, that's sound ball. Nice job.
Yeah,
Have you
cool.
ever played that game before?
I think I might have done some alcohol-related version of this game.
That makes sense. A
Yeah,
tremendous number of improv games come from drinking games. It's very
I can
silly.
imagine.
Yeah. So with that game, you would be amazed at how many times I've been standing in a circle and somebody catches the ball and they go, I can't think of anything.
Yeah.
And when the whole world is possible, any sound at all in the world is possible, that can be overwhelming.
Mm-hmm.
So just the openness of possibility can shut some people down. But it's in more commonly, I think that what they've got, instead of just make a sound, they have this expectation written in their, in their own backstory, that they need to make a good sound, a new sound, an interesting sound,
Mm.
a positive sound, a pleasant sound, right? That they need to do something that has some kind of expectation attached to it, when in actuality, any mouth sound will do. Right? It's like any sound. And in fact,
Mm-hmm.
I can't think of anything. That's 5 different sounds, at least 5. So, I mean, they could go, ah. So, uh, so we are hampered by expectations we put on ourselves. We're hampered by expectations our teachers, our parents, our society puts upon us. And some people have been told their whole lives that they're not interesting or clever. Some people have been told that they are. Both of those things can be equally hobbling and prevent people from just being present.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I don't remember why I launched into that game, but thank you for
Well,
playing
yeah.
it.
Yeah, well, I think I was going to ask, like, how do you think why so many people are so bad at improvisation? Well, it's just telling stuff you're saying yourself or what's coming up in your mind. What did you
Wait,
do?
wait. You just gave me an idea. Said something that I don't necessarily agree with. You said, why are so many people bad at improvisation?
Okay. Yeah. I think so.
Oh,
Like
so
I think,
have I
like you
said that,
meant.
or do you think
No, no,
that?
no, no, no. That's
Okay.
something I think, but I thought of it in the framework as I often ask people, why are so many people so bad at public speaking? Because that's something I'm learning about. But
Ah,
in that context, I was curious to see if people are also bad at improvisation. But maybe people are better at improvisation than just public speaking, but I'm not sure.
uh, mm. I think that what you're talking about is what I would call a mindset.
Mm-hmm.
So my mindset as a teacher of improvisation is that people aren't bad at it. They're hampered by restrictions.
Okay, yeah.
And that to get so they're not takes a lot of, it can take time and practice.
Mm-hmm.
So not everybody who takes an improv workshop can go on stage and have an audience pay to watch them that night.
Mm-hmm.
And when you talk about people, public speaking, we've been practicing speaking our entire lives. People learn to talk at 2 or 3 or 4 years old. People talk early, and we talk all our lives.
Mm-hmm.
Most of us. And so I guess there is a reasonable expectation that you would just get up in front of people and be able to talk. And my perspective about why people uh, have a problem with that, or maybe they're bad, or maybe they're not good at it,
Mm-hmm.
is nervousness, anxiety, and adrenaline. And I gotta say, adrenaline is the enemy of spontaneous creativity. If you take a bunch of improvisers and inject them with adrenaline, they
Mm-hmm.
go on stage, and depending on their age, they get violent. They stop paying attention to each other. They do monologues. They shut down. It's basically, it's fight or flight. So for me, teaching improv is a lot about disarming the helping people get more and more comfortable being spontaneous, so that an audience doesn't stimulate adrenaline. The amygdala, the little tiny part of your brain that is sometimes called the lizard brain,
Yeah.
it tells the adrenal glands, we're in stress and we need adrenaline, which would be very helpful if what you wanted to do was climb a tree to get away from the tsunami,
Hmm.
right? It's like adrenaline is great for getting away from danger or fighting,
Yeah.
but adrenaline is not at all helpful if you're trying to be reasonable, persuasive, to negotiate, to explain a very complex issue to someone who may not understand it. And all of those aspects of public speaking are completely destroyed by adrenaline. And what comes up with, adrenaline makes improvisers, well, I taught improv with a bunch of kids who were about 13 years old,
Hmm.
and they were great in the workshop. And then they did a showcase for their parents. And it was all, it's basically the boys just pretended to beat each other up.
Yeah.
And the girls stood against the back wall like this, watching, going, we're not doing any of what we practiced. So adrenaline, basically gets in the way of being playful.
Okay. Yeah.
Oh my
Sure.
God. I mean, we all know this from playing games. Like if you think about any board game, like
Hmm.
chess or, just any board game, I must win this game. This is the game I will win. That kind of pressure releases adrenaline, and you can't think straight.
So, how can you teach people to use adrenaline in a better way, or to be less stressful in those kind of situations, to be more comfortable so that adrenaline isn't going to take them over?
Okay, so I don't know if you know this, but if you take a frog, some people in the United States eat frogs. So if you take a frog and you put it in boiling water, it'll jump out.
Hmm.
But if you take a frog and you put it in cool water and you gradually heat the water, you can boil the frog.
Mm.
It's a very funny analogy for teaching
Yeah.
improv. But it's a gradual exposure. So being able to spontaneously just listen to a sound and throw a new sound in sound ball, standing in a circle in front of people, doing that, it disarms you a little bit. So basically, exposure to being spontaneous in the classroom, the exposure to being spontaneous when you have some kind of restriction, like uh, oh, disassociated images, the
Hmm.
restriction of you can't say anything related, or you can only say one word, right? Any kind of restriction, being able to be spontaneous, it gets us more and more comfortable with being spontaneous with ourselves. That's the first step. Accepting our own ideas is a big one for some people.
Hmm.
And then the focus turns to our partners, and we accept the ideas of our partners. And if your focus is on your partner rather than yourself, that can really help to diffuse a lot of the self consciousness that can stimulate adrenaline or make us nervous, right?
Yeah.
Just focusing on your partner. Because if I'm really curious about what you're going to say and you say the next word of the story, then I'm not going, what am I going to say? What am I going to say? I'm
Mm.
going, what is he going to say? So if my focus is on, allowing myself to be spontaneous in day one of improv class, and then day 2 through 100 is about working working off my partner. There is one improv idea that is basically you follow the follower. So nobody's leading, right? Nobody's the boss of the story. Everybody's following everybody, and you're gradually unfolding things together and putting your focus on the other and doing what you can to make them look good or make their story work. Or if I say a word and my intention is to make it a word that you might find inspiring,
Hmm.
all my focus is off of me and it's on you. So that can really help us not be nervous. And eventually you get so when you are in your story, you can be aware of your audience and performing for your audience. Like my audience is out there and I'm aware of them, but my focus is still on my partner. So I'm loud enough to be heard. I've got the light on me. I can be seen, but I still have focus on my partner and on the scene we're doing together. And I'm less nervous because I'm not, yeah, it's where your focus and intention is, I guess. I just said that about 12 times, but what's my intention? So, and that equates to public speaking, in that if my intention is to really share meaning, what do I have to say? What do I want my partners to understand? If that's my intention, then it takes my intention away from, I want to look good, I want to get the promotion, I want to win.
Yeah, cool. I think that's a super insightful way to look at active listening. That is also that you can also use it as a tool to get out of your own head if you're feeling really self-conscious at the moment and you feel maybe a little too much inside of your own head. You can leverage conscious listening, active listening to the other to come more inside of the conversation. Yeah, cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
Nice. Do you have some more games that we can play?
Yes. Okay, we're going to play another story game.
Okay.
And I have many, many games that are not story games, but there are only two of us.
Mm-hmm.
And we're online. So we're going to play a story game because they translate the most easily to this environment.
Yeah.
Okay, this time, oh, and by the way, some of the games I play, I know where they came from, and some that I don't. Like the associated images, disassociated images comes from Keith Johnstone. But the word at a time story, although I learned it from Keith, it may not be his game. I think, it's like, it could be a game that people have played since language was invented.
Mm-hmm.
And it might be in the book Improvisation for the Theater, written by Viola Spolin. It might be in that book, but I haven't found it there. So anyway, okay, so we're going to play a game where we make a story together, one sentence at a time.
Okay.
And you repeat the last sentence your partner just said.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if I say, the cat curled up in the sunshine, then you would say the cat curled up in the sunshine and the wind blew. Okay, so whatever. We'll throw that one away.
Yeah.
But it's you repeat what was just said. You can change the structure if, to make the language work if you need to.
Okay, yeah.
Okay, would you start a story? And it's not about me or we or I
Mm-hmm.
or a celebrity. It's a fictitious story, a third person story.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
The car was out there in the rain.
The car was in the rain and she wanted to have a place to park under shelter.
She wanted to have a place to park under shelter, but there wasn't anything to find.
There wasn't anything to find. So she tried to send the message to her driver that she needed shelter.
She tried to send the message to her driver that she needed shelter, but he wasn't responding.
He wasn't responding. So she sent her message through the speakers in the car radio.
She sent her message through the speakers in the car radio and still he wasn't responding. Was he even there?
He wasn't responding. Was he even there? She turned on her engine and drove to the front door.
She turned on her engine and drove to the front door, and there she was.
There she was, and he heard the sound of his car starting.
She heard the sound of his car starting and she looked around, but where was the car actually?
The car driver opened his front door and saw his car on the front porch running.
The car driver opened his door and saw the car in his front door in the driving way. They both looked curious at each other.
They both looked curious at each other. And the driver ran to get into the car.
The driver ran to get into the car, but the door was locked.
The door was locked, and he banged on the door saying, "Let me in, let me in."
The door was locked and he banged on the door saying, let me in, and then the car stopped.
The car stopped, and the man opened the door.
The man opened the door, looked at the woman again, and started laughing.
The man started laughing, and the car knew that she would have shelter. The end. Wow.
Nice. That was fun to do. I was really involved in this story.
I love it. Really? You could see it?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Yeah. Not everyone is a visual thinker, but those of us who see pictures when we tell a story, or when we hear a story,
Mm-hmm.
Improv is a very vivid form. And I've even had people who come to see a show. And in our shows, we don't use props or costumes most of the time. Our live theater shows, we use, for a throne might be just a black box,
Mm-hmm.
right? And a crown would be just a pretend crown. There's nothing really there, right?
Yeah.
But I once had a friend come to me, an audience member come to me on the street and she said, "Oh my God, I'm always thinking about that scene that you did where you were the queen. You had such an elaborate costume and the throne was so beautiful and your red robe." And I'm like, none of that happened except in your own mind. So, that visualization happens for many of the improvisers and many of the audience members, where if we just commit to it as if it is there, the audience sees it.
Nice.
So that story was very challenging in that the personification of an inanimate object,
Mm-hmm.
or the anthropomorphification of an automobile,
Yeah.
giving a car a desire. and it's like that's kind of a challenging story subject for you to start with. Well done.
Thanks.
A really simple, I did that, so my bad, but a simple way to start would be the car's in the rain and the man goes to get in the car, or the woman goes to get in the car, or or the child sits in the back seat, or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So so well done. I don't know who created this story exactly, but it's a really good one for Zoom, or for online communication.
Yeah, okay.
Is when I'm in a room with people and we make stories together, we can act them out, we can play, and we can use our bodies, and we become the characters. And that's much harder for beginning improvisers to do when you're facing a screen. Right? You're sitting in a room in your house facing a screen. It's harder to embody and become the part of the story. And then the other thing is that when we're together, we read each other. We're constantly, our limbic brain is wired to read other people's body language. We hear something like the intake of air, we know that somebody has an impulse. We pick up on other people's nonverbal signals constantly.
Mm-hmm.
Most of us, not all humans, but most of us do. We just read other people. And with that gone, a lot of basic improvisation games sort of break down. So that's why I do things like with the sound ball, have you throw the ball toward the camera.
Yeah.
And repeat the previous sentence. If we try to make a story spontaneously, one sentence at a time, without repeating, it's really easy for it almost to be two separate stories, for the stories to go off in opposite directions.
Mm-hmm.
So there's this added challenge of improvising and communicating online. That's, we're all living with it. We all recognize it. I'm sure every listener of your podcast has had the experience of trying to have a meaningful interaction online and being frustrated by it.
Yeah,
it's also exhausting.
Yeah, why do you think that is?
One of the theories is because we are designed to read other people, your body is still, I mean, your system is still trying to perceive, like reaching out to perceive others
Mm-hmm.
and not getting any information. But a big part of it, I think, Pim, is just that if we were in a room, if we were even at, at a table having lunch or tea together, having this conversation, we're in real space, and we're interacting and we're
Mm-hmm.
alive. And here I need to stay in front of the screen. How often do you actually engage with people sitting completely still in a
Yeah.
chair or standing completely still? Most of the time when I teach and all the time when I perform improv, I stand because I want to have access to more of my being. We're
Mm-hmm.
smarter when we're standing.
So I read somewhere that you are also helping teams to connect better over Zoom in these times with improvisation.
Yeah. Yeah. One of the things I really, really love doing is uh, sharing the principles of improvisation and in many cases, just the games that we play in improv,
Mm-hmm.
sharing those with people who are working together. And whether you're working together as, as a cohort in a training program or at school, or you're working together as a team to accomplish something, in business or in any kind of human endeavor, really.
Mm-hmm.
uh, these online engagements, they shut us down.
Mm-hmm.
They're tiring. What is it? Zoom fatigue, people talk
Yeah.
about. Yeah. So they're tiring. They can create anxiety. They make people's eyes tired and dry. It's like it's hard on us. And promoting play, and even if you have an hour-long meeting, start with playing a game. Like any of the games I've modeled, sound ball or word, one word at a time story, or free association, or one sentence at a time story. Play a game when you start to connect,
Mm-hmm.
because then you're actually being changed by the people you're working with. And simply, reminding your system, it's like I can intellectually tell myself I'm having this important meeting and I will learn from my colleagues. I could tell
Mm-hmm.
myself that. But playing the game makes it real.
Yeah, okay, otherwise it feels kind of like you're just watching another YouTube video, but then it's live,
Yeah.
but you don't really feel like it's live.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's this thing where people are just sort of sitting on Zoom
Yeah.
because they're required to be at this meeting. And it's just them being there until they can get their work done again.
Hmm.
Because they have to go to this meeting because they were invited. So promoting engagement with a game, even at the beginning
Hmm.
of a meeting, maybe at the beginning and the end. And so that's one of the things I really love doing is offering workshops that are about uh, like games you can play to promote engagement,
Hmm.
games you can play to deepen the interpersonal relationships between people on a team,
Hmm.
ga- games that you can play just to help get to know each other. There are games you can play to promote creativity, and uh, and all it takes is somebody who's willing to take the risk. And it's great if it's a leader in an organization, because the leader can say, today we're going to start with something different, and people will do it.
Yeah.
But if somebody's the member of a team, it might be harder for them to say, you guys, I just learned this game, and I want to play it before, at the beginning of our meeting today. It's harder to do that
Hmm.
if in some organizations if you're not the leader. So I offer a lot of workshops for business leaders in order to, or the people who are facilitating meetings online, to help make this a better place to meet, basically. And it's creating that expectation in ourselves that we have something of value that we're going to get from the other person. Play builds that.
Cool. Yeah, the last time we hopped on a call, it felt a bit like we knew each other for long and we just connected with each other and just had a really nice conversation just from the first second. Do you feel like improvisation is helping you a lot in connecting better with people also outside of Zoom, just in the regular world throughout your whole life?
Yes. Oh my God, yes.
Tell me about it.
Well, believe it or not, I was very, very socially uncomfortable when I was young. And I was in high school, I was very quiet and I preferred to read a book. And I didn't want to speak up in class. I felt like an outsider. A lot of reasons for that. I was just not socially comfortable. And a series of some friends and some events led to me being in a play in high school. So, one of my friends basically dragged me in to try out for a play. And it changed my life because I was still not speaking up from myself, but I was speaking up and I was on stage in front of an audience speaking up. And I was saying words written by a playwright and I was wearing a costume, that somebody else told me to wear, so it was theater, but it was me speaking up. And it was the first step in me finding my voice as a young woman. But prior to that, I was comfortable and noisy with family and close friends, but very shy socially in larger groups. And it felt like it gave me a voice. Well, improvisation just doubled down on that because the practice of improvisation just helped me accept my own ideas. And it gave me permission to speak up, to say what I feel, to say what I think, to say what I believe. And improv, it just unleashed my creativity, but also, made me comfortable in my own skin. So to this day, if I take one of those tests that tells you if you're introverted or extroverted, and there are many, many tests like that, or they call them evaluation tools, I always test as introverted, but people just wouldn't believe that. And it's not because I'm just blabbing all the time in a group, but it's because I don't look uncomfortable when I speak up. And that's years of training. It's years of training and years of teaching and that experience that's given me the confidence to just be still and say what I know and listen to other people. Does that make sense? Am I answering your question?
Absolutely, yeah.
I felt like I went off on a tangent, Tim.
No, I don't think so. It was also interesting to hear you talk about the difference between extroverted and introverted, because I sometimes myself feel quite introverted. I don't know, I would test maybe as an introvert in those kind of tests. And stuff like public speaking, but also other stuff, just playing games with friends, is helping me a lot to get out of that. And one of the things I think is especially interesting is that I notice myself, I'm quite okay being introverted, but I actually enjoy the day more or the evening more if I was more extroverted at that time. So I don't know if this is for everyone, if this is the case for everyone, if it works like that for everyone, but I'm like, also kind of through this podcast, I'm like searching for tools and better ways to have more power over this, have more tools to actually get out of my own head and be more extroverted when I want to be at that moment, so that I can know and that I can decide whether I want to be introverted or extroverted. That's what I'm also kind of looking for. And I think, improvisation, like you told this story, is so relevant for this also.
Yeah. I the assumption is that people who are outgoing are extroverted and people who are quiet are introverted.
Hmm.
But the real test is if you think about when you spend a day, if you spend a lot of time with other people, like where you're with people and you're talking all day and you're having a very social day, at the end of that day, do you feel good and energized, or do you feel tired and depleted? So I'm asking you, Pim, how do you feel
Okay.
at the end of a social day?
Well, I would say definitely energized, but it depends a bit on whether I was able to actually engage in the conversations and stuff like that.
Right.
Because at points where I can't get myself to involve in the conversation and just sitting quietly at the side of the table or just witnessing the conversation, then it's really tiring for me. But otherwise,
Wow.
when I engage, then it's really energizing.
Right. So if I spend a day engaging and being
Hmm.
noisy and being part of the conversation and having a lot of interaction, I'm exhausted.
Hmm.
I'm just exhausted. And sometimes I need to take the next day and be quiet. That's that means to me that means I'm more introverted.
Yeah, I think so,
I
definitely.
actually get my energy from my quiet time.
Mm.
And the way you describe it, you get energy from being out loud.
Yeah,
So
yeah, 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 yeah.
I think the whole introvert extrovert thing is it's a um, it's a false narrative in a way.
Mm.
It's not a real thing. But we do see in the world some people who seem completely comfortable being big and loud, and some people who seem more comfortable being quiet. And
Mm.
it's not black and white, but it's more of a spectrum. And it's like when I take the tests, if there's a line and you're way extroverted or you're way introverted,
Hmm.
I'm on the just slightly introverted side of the line,
Yeah, yeah.
right? So it's more of a spectrum. And you getting more and more comfortable with speaking up is part of your process so that you can comfortably engage more. And it sounds like that the coaching that you've been getting has been perfect for that. Being
Hmm.
able to organize your thoughts and articulate, get articulate what you're thinking pretty spontaneously is a great skill to work on. And
Hmm.
improv is one way to do that. And the training the coaching that you've done is another way to, it's another way to do that. Being it yeah, the world is full of people who are not really comfortable being looked at. So here's why. Here's why. Can I tell you why?
Go ahead,
Okay. So
please.
if you think about it, if you were a creature in a forest and you could feel eyes looking at you, and we can feel when people are looking at us.
Hmm.
Yeah? Like if you're sitting on the bus, you can get a feeling in the back of your neck that you're being looked at, and you turn and somebody is staring at you. You know that feeling? So
Yeah,
if you're a
yeah.
small animal in the forest and everybody is looking at you, you're food, right? You're the prey.
Hmm.
And if you right, if you're doing this, you're the prey. You're looking for danger.
Yeah.
But if you are,
If you're scanning around.
yeah, scanning around, that's
Yeah,
looking for danger.
yeah.
If I'm in front of you and I'm looking right at you, then I am the predator. But if you think about a bunch of improvisers going on stage and they just go, "Oh, everybody's looking at me," then suddenly they are prey. And a big part of learning not to experience being looked at that way, and I mean, yeah, to not be experience stage fright in that way of suddenly shutting down and fight or flight.
Yeah.
A lot of it is learning to experience the audience as as it's like part of, it's my people basically.
Mm-hmm.
So they are no longer predators. They are family and friends.
Mm.
They're, yeah. And one of the exercises that, or one of the things I learned to do is, instead of going on stage armored and guarded and all, sort of the way I learned to do in theater school, to just have a character as armor,
Mm-hmm.
and go on stage kind of rigid and protected. And when the audience looks at me, I just try to reflect it and bounce it away. Then I'm not really there with my audience. I'm pushing my audience away. So I've learned to think of it as energy flowing toward me, and I let it flow toward me and through me. And I give it back. So when I go on stage, I haven't been on stage since last March. Oh my God. But if I go on, I did an improv show
Yeah.
last March, and within like 3 days, the shutdown happened in California. But anyway, if I just allow the energy to come to me and absorb that energy, then I'm empowered by being looked at. That sounds megalomaniacal. It sounds kind of crazy, but it really is. If you think of energy the way, the perception of chi energy as being waves and flow,
Mm-hmm.
I accept the energy, and then I can communicate with you. We meet, I feel like we know each other.
Yeah.
But if I go, I will project confidence and I will be armored. Yes, I have a lot to say about improv. Then I'm a different creature. So learning to like the energy coming your way, I think, is part of being able to speak up without feeling that, I'm going to speak up.
Yeah. Okay. So turning a energy that you might feel as negative into something positive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But the reason people have stage fright is completely normal and natural. Being looked at by a group of predators is a
Mm-hmm.
dangerous position, and human beings are predators. Our eyes are on the front of our head.
Yeah.
Big thoughts. Big thoughts about improv. Welcome to Big Thoughts About Improv with Rebecca Stockley.
So you also sent me an email before the podcast with some kind of script.
Oh
in
yeah,
it?
we're going to play a game.
Yeah, what kind of game is that?
So this is a game. It's a story game, and it was created by an improviser who's also a playwright. His name is Ken
Yeah.
Adams. And Ken grew up in New York, and he started doing improv, and then he studied playwriting. And when he was doing improv, he really wanted structure. So he invented a lot of different ways to do improv that have structure to them. And I have found this game, it was named the Story Spine. I have found the story spine is invaluable for improvisers for a few reasons, but one of the reasons is because, there are a lot of reasons, but one of the reasons is because by playing this game a lot, like, over and over, you start to assimilate story, and the expectation that of cause and effect, of one thing leading to another, just becomes like the way we think. And it for me, it's gotten rid of the idea that I need to be interesting or clever or please some absent story evaluator, but just go with the story as it is being told.
Mm-hmm.
And so you and I are going to play this game. And the first sentence of the game is once upon a time. And the way it works is the first speaker says once upon a time, and then they say what happens next.
Okay.
And let's do it as a third person narrative. So we're not talking about us. So once upon a time, and then you just say what happens next. And the structure is once upon a time, every day, but one day. From there, we move into Act 2. Because of that, because of that, because of that. It's just cause and effect.
Okay.
And then it goes until finally, and then ever since that day. And then I added the moral because some groups were dissatisfied with their stories. And if you do a little moral at the end, then it can make sense of what may not have made sense, or it
Yeah.
can make you laugh, or it can show you how silly the story was.
Hmm.
So I want to acknowledge that Ken didn't put the moral on there, and I did. So I know what the moral of the story is. But uh, yeah, you and I will play it. But I want to just point out that this is a very Western perspective of story.
Hmm.
From the Greeks and the Romans, we learned that stories have a beginning, a middle, an end. The exposition of the beginning, where we meet the characters and find out what they want, what the great improv teacher Viola Spolin called who, what, and where. So that's Act One. And then Act Two is because of that, because of that, because of that, where it's cause and effect. And then until finally is basically the climax of your story. And ever since that day, and the moral of the story is the denouement, or the falling action, where in a film, the camera shows that everybody gets married to everybody or has a happily ever after in some way. Or all of the Star Wars characters get an award, except for Chewbacca, which never seemed fair. Okay, so we'll tell a story together. Would you like to start with the Once Upon a Time and then just finish that sentence?
Yeah, okay. So I'll grab the email. Yeah, okay. Once upon a time, there was this guy standing in front of the mirror.
And every day he went back to his mirror to notice the tiniest changes in how he looked.
But one day, he decided he wasn't going to do that anymore.
Because of that, he went outside.
And because of that, he started to notice different things.
And because of that, his world got bigger.
Until finally, he found his edges of the world.
His what of the world?
His edges of the world. His boundaries, like where I can't go across this.
Okay, yeah, he found his boundaries
Yeah,
of the world.
yeah,
It's a word I don't know, sorry.
Yeah, that's right.
Until finally he found his boundaries of the world. And ever since that day, he looks out rather than looking in.
So the moral of this story is that you shouldn't put so much detail in looking at stuff you're doing yourself, but should aim your attention at the world.
Wow. I don't know if that story is, I believe that story, but that's the story we told.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Well, it's fun because this is, I think, like you're talking about, if you just have anything to talk about, then it's kind of hard to tell a story. But if you have some kind of restrictions, some format, then it's kind of easy to start telling a certain story.
Yeah, restrictions inspire creativity. A completely open universe and blank canvas can be very intimidating.
Yeah.
Let's do one more.
Yeah, okay.
Once upon a time, there was a family of ducklings.
Every day the ducklings went across the street.
But one day, a truck hit one of them and killed it.
And because of that, they never crossed that street again.
Because of that, they were confined to one small pond.
And because of that, they started to gain weight.
Until finally they couldn't fly anymore.
And ever since then, they were just sitting over there and eating their food.
The moral of the story is things might be hard, but keep going. Okay, so I want to point out that one of the things that I teach people in improvisation is that you're not responsible for the content of your imagination.
Yeah, okay.
If we brought in a critic or an analyst to analyze the stories we just told, we would definitely be reflecting on the pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
right? Like all of us are you're working online and basically looking into a mirror. And the first line of your story was once upon a time, there was a guy who looked in the mirror,
Yeah.
right? And then the pandemic of we don't go outside because it's dangerous out there. So we just stay in our own little pond and get fatter and fatter,
Yeah.
right? It's like, at least that's my experience in California. Things are still pretty bad here. So yeah, so people are in their homes getting fatter and fatter. One of the things that I work on is encouraging people to just go with what comes up and don't evaluate or analyze it, because that can freeze you in your tracks, right? If people start thinking, oh no, if I say that, they'll know this about me, I can't say that, then it can just freeze you. Don't worry about it. But later, people are going to tell you what it meant. And I've learned to just go, wow, oh my gosh, that's so fascinating. Rather than going, no, it didn't mean that.
Yeah.
I was just being spontaneous. It's like, oh, that's what you saw? In a way, it's like abstract painting. The artist is not in control of the audience's perception.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So,
So,
in conclusion,
Rebecca.
how do we bring this conversation to a close?
Well, by asking you for some homework that I can practice, and maybe the listeners can also practice to become better improvisers.
Well, Pim, I would like to encourage you to teach the games that we've played to the people that you communicate with.
All right.
And the story spine, and I shared that with you in print. I guess people would have to go back and listen to that part again to hear the structure. But the story spine, Once Upon a Time Every Day, is a great game to play with kids. With very little kids, they will just take the story and run with it. And I would not impose on them the restrictions of the structure, because small children seem to know more about story than we do.
Yeah.
So if they're really little kids, just use the structure to help yourself navigate and let the kids go crazy. But it's a great game to teach to family members, to friends, this game it's an amazing game to play. All of these games are. But they're a great way to, just to explore and liberate your own imagination. A great way to really, as you said, listen actively. The active listening required to build stories together is great. So you're practicing that skill. And you're also practicing allowing your partner to change you and the adapting. So I'd say, from sound ball to word ball, where it's just